It began with a phone call, a calm voice, official tone. Mr. Dawson, this is Veterans Security Affairs. We've detected an issue with your benefit. We just need to verify a code. Curtis Dawson, 91, 3 decades in the Navy, hesitated, then believed. One moment of trust, one slip. Minutes later, his bank account was empty. Gone. But they didn't just steal money. They stole dignity trust. The last piece of peace a proud man carried. What they didn't know was who he really was. And when the truth surfaced, it wouldn't just be fraud. It would shake a system. A movement would rise. The nation would listen. And by the end, even the president would stand to salute the man they tried to forget. Curtis Dawson had always been a quiet man. Not the kind of quiet that came from weakness or fear, but the quiet of someone who had seen enough, fought enough, and earned the right to let silence do the talking. He lived alone in a modest second-floor apartment just outside the historic district of Savannah, Georgia. The kind of place where the windows creaked in the wind and the pipes groaned in the morning. The wallpaper had faded to a hue somewhere between cream and surrender, and the carpet told stories of every step that had come before. But Curtis liked it that way. It was paid off. It was his. At 91, Curtis moved slower than he used to, but with the same deliberation that had once carried him across minefields and stormy decks. Every morning at 6:30 a.m., sharp, he made coffee. 2 scoops of Maxwell House boiled on the stove, not the microwave. He said it tasted more honest that way. Breakfast was usually a single slice of toast with peanut butter and maybe a banana if they were on sale. He didn't spend more than $40 a week on groceries, and even then, it made him flinch. He wore the same 3 shirts in rotation, pressed tucked in. His shoes were polished on Sunday nights even if he had nowhere to go. That came from the Navy. Discipline appearance order. He had served 30 years through Korea, Vietnam, and every storm in between. Not because he wanted to be a hero, but because he believed someone had to stand the line. And Curtis Dawson stood it longer than most. The only decoration in his living room was a shadow box on the wall, a faded flag, 3 campaign ribbons, and a photo of a much younger Curtis in dress blues standing beside 2 shipmates long gone. He never mentioned the medals. He never brought up the promotions he turned down. Doing the right thing is its own reward, he'd say. And he meant it. Neighbors didn't know much about him. Some thought he was just another old man living off a pension. Others whispered that he'd once saved a crew from a burning destroyer, but couldn't prove it. He never corrected them. Curtis never bragged. He believed pride was something you carried quietly like a folded flag. Despite his age, Curtis paid his bills on time, kept every receipt, and kept a ledger in neat handwriting, blue ink only. He didn't trust online banking much. Didn't trust politicians either. But he trusted the system because he had helped build it. At least he used to. What Curtis Dawson didn't know on that gray November morning was that his system, the one he defended, saluted, and sacrificed for, was about to fail him, and that the entire nation would soon have to decide whether men like him still mattered. The call came on a Tuesday. Gray skies hung low over Savannah, the kind of weather that made Curtis's bones ache before the rain ever started. He had just finished going over his monthly budget for the 4th time, using the same yellow legal pad he always did. Each page dated, every line neatly ruled. He glanced at the small flip phone sitting beside his coffee cup. It vibrated once, unknown number. Unknown. Curtis rarely picked up calls he didn't recognize. But today, something made him answer. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was hope. The extra VA payment he'd been expecting was a week late. Maybe this was someone from the department finally calling to fix it. He flipped the phone open. Mr. Dawson speaking. This is Devin Clark with Veteran Security Affairs. We've detected a delay in your benefits. There appears to be an issue with the transfer. I can help you resolve it right away. The voice was calm, professional, young but trained. Not overly polite, just enough to feel official. Curtis squinted as if narrowing his eyes might help him see the person behind the words. Issue with the transfer. Yes, sir. Nothing serious, but if we don't verify some details today, the payment may be held for up to 90 days. We're trying to expedite on your behalf. Curtis frowned. He'd been waiting on that money to cover his heating bill and refill his prescriptions. 90 days, that wasn't an option. Still, caution tugged at the back of his mind. He had trusted too many things in his life that turned out to be lies. Politicians, contracts, even the promises made to veterans. What kind of verification? We've sent a one-time passcode to your phone. Once you read it back, I can log it and release the funds today. And then like clockwork, the phone buzzed again. A 6-digit code. He stared at it. His gut said something was off, but the voice, it didn't push. It guided, reassured. Just read the number back when you're ready, Mr. Dawson. This helps us protect veterans like you. 926 Malcolm 08. There was a pause. Perfect. You're all set, sir. Thank you again for your service. Click. The line went dead. Curtis sat in silence, phone still in hand. Something twisted in his chest, not pain, not yet, but that old familiar feeling that came before something went wrong. He stood, walked to his desk, and opened his aging laptop. It took nearly a minute to load his banking app. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitant. When the screen finally lit up, his world narrowed to one number, 0, Artur, 0. Every cent, every dollar of his carefully rationed balance gone. Curtis stared at the screen. At first he felt nothing. Then came the heat behind his eyes, the cold in his spine. Not rage, not even fear. Shame. He had fallen for it. A Navy commander, fooled like a rookie. But this wasn't over. Not yet. Curtis didn't move for a long time. He sat in the same wooden chair by the window, flip phone still in hand, the glow of the laptop screen slowly dimming as it timed out. His coffee had gone cold. The room was still too still, the kind of quiet that didn't bring peace but pressure. For the first time in years, he felt small. Smaller than he had on a gunboat under fire. Smaller than he had beside the caskets of men half his age. This wasn't combat. It was something worse. Humiliation. He had trusted the voice, trusted the system. And in that trust, they had taken everything. Not just the money. That was the surface wound. What bled deeper was what they'd really stolen: his self-respect. Curtis had built his life around doing things the right way. He had never borrowed more than he could repay, never missed a rent check, never once asked for a handout. And now at 91, with a wall full of folded flags and faded commendations, he had been tricked like a schoolboy. Fool, he whispered to himself. The word echoed in the room. He didn't eat that night, couldn't stomach the thought. Instead, he sat in his recliner, wrapped in a wool Navy-issue blanket, older than most people on his street. The apartment around him hummed with the sounds of aged creaking pipes, wine in the windows, the low, steady groan of a dying refrigerator. He thought about calling someone, but who? He had outlived his closest friends. The neighbors barely knew his name. And pride, his oldest, most loyal companion, kept him from dialing the VA hotline, kept him from calling the bank, kept him from saying the words, "I was scammed," because saying it made it real. He turned on the television but didn't watch. Just let the light flicker across the room. The newscaster's voice was background noise to the storm in his mind. He opened the ledger on his desk again, running his finger down the column of bills. Rent, utilities, prescriptions, all due in the next 10 days. He had $14 in cash left in an envelope in the kitchen drawer. Enough for a few groceries. Not enough for the heating bill. Not even close. Still, he didn't cry. Curtis hadn't cried since 1972, when he carried his best friend's body across a battlefield in Vietnam. But what stirred now, what pressed at the corners of his eyes, wasn't just grief. It was exhaustion. Not the kind you sleep off. The kind that sinks into your bones. He finally rose from the chair, walked to the bathroom, and looked at himself in the mirror. Same face, same eyes. Same man who had once led men through fire. But behind those eyes, something had cracked. Not broken, but shaken. And quietly, without fanfare, Curtis folded the VA letter, slid it into his coat pocket, and made a decision. He would not die invisible. Maya Thomas never expected to witness history with a mop in her hands. She was the kind of woman most people didn't notice. Quiet, efficient, always cleaning the corners no one else thought about. The bank lobby was her routine shift. She worked there every Tuesday and Thursday after dropping her daughter off at elementary school and visiting her father at the VA hospital. She had noticed Curtis Dawson long before that day. He was one of the few people who looked janitors in the eye and said, "Ma'am," like it still meant something. That morning she had seen him enter the lobby, navy coat, faded cap, tilted neatly, hands wrapped in old fingerless gloves. He looked like a man carrying invisible weight. Maya had paused her mop when the security guard chuckled, and the young teller popped her gum and dismissed him like a telemarketer. She didn't interfere. Not yet. But her chest tightened. And when Curtis stood at the door, fingers raised to his brow in a silent private salute to the flag, Maya didn't see a frail old man. She saw her father. The same weary posture, the same look that veterans got when the world passed them by. That mix of patience, pain, and pride all rolled into one glance. She watched him leave. The next morning, while sweeping salt off the front steps of her apartment complex, she nearly dropped the broom when she saw him again. Curtis Dawson, usually steady, looked different, hollowed out. Something had changed. His coat was zipped too tight like armor. His eyes didn't scan the sidewalk. They stared through it. "Mr. Dawson, you okay?" she asked, stepping closer. He hesitated, then simply said, "Had to file a report. Someone stole my benefit check. Clean me out." Her broom slowed. "Did they help you?" No answer. Just the silence that spoke louder than 100 complaints. That was when Maya made a decision. She didn't know why it wasn't like her to cross lines, but something about the way Curtis stood there, shoulders trying so hard to stay proud, it broke her heart. "Sir, do you mind if I take your picture?" Curtis blinked. "What for?" "I think people should see you." "Hear this. My dad was Army. I know that look. You're not invisible." He didn't want to be seen, but he didn't want to disappear either. He nodded. She raised her phone, adjusted the angle, and asked him to hold the VA letter. He did, hands trembling slightly but eyes straight ahead. The photo captured more than a man. It captured a moment. An old soldier in the cold coat, zipped, standing alone in a world that had moved on, still holding proof that he once mattered. That night, Maya posted the photo online with a short caption, "This is Curtis Dawson, 91. Navy vet. Scammed. Mocked by police. We must do better. Please share." She went to bed thinking it might get a few likes. By morning, the world was watching. By the time Maya woke up the next morning, her phone had nearly overheated. She blinked against the early light, disoriented by the flood of notifications. Hundreds, no thousands of comments, retweets, shares. Messages from people she didn't know, names she'd only seen on TV. Her post had exploded overnight like dry tinder meeting a single spark. The photo of Curtis Dawson standing stoic under overcast skies holding a government-issued letter, like a final tether to his dignity, had struck a nerve the country didn't know it had. Veterans reposted it with stories of their own. One tweet read, "Curtis Dawson, that's Commander Dawson. I served under him on the USS Midway. Man saved my life in '68. Another, he pulled my brother from a downed chopper in Da Nang. No one ever told that story because Curtis never took credit." Comment after comment piled up. Legend. Honor in silence. America forgot him, but not today. It wasn't just veterans. It was school teachers, nurses, grandkids of soldiers who had once served beside him. Even a retired senator chimed in. "Commander Dawson once briefed our delegation during my first trip to the Gulf. Most composed man I ever met." By noon, a journalist from a regional paper in Atlanta picked up the story. By 2:00 p.m., 3 local news stations had sent vans to the apartment complex. Cameras rolled outside while Curtis sat quietly in his chair, unaware. His old flip phone buzzed. Again and again. Maya knocked gently, breathless. "Sir? I think you need to see this." She handed him her tablet. On it, his photo, his name, his story, plastered across the homepage of CNN, Fox News, even military forums he'd never heard of. Curtis stared in silence, lips slightly parted. "I don't understand," he murmured. "Why now?" Maya knelt beside him. "Because the world forgot you, but your men didn't, and neither did the country." That night, hashtags trended nationwide. Sharks salute Curtis, Shash forgotten, but not gone, Shash Commander Dawson. By evening, the White House press secretary received a flurry of emails flagged as urgent. One from a senior official in the Department of Veterans Affairs simply read, "He's not just another case. This is bigger. We need to move fast." In Savannah, strangers arrived at the apartment building. Former Navy medics, ROTC cadets from Georgia Southern. A young Marine in full uniform stood outside Curtis's door, silent, holding a folded flag. Maya peeked through the window and whispered, "They're not here for a photo op. They're here for you." And for the first time in a very long time, Curtis Dawson didn't feel small. He felt seen. By 8:15 a.m., the photo of Curtis Dawson had reached the West Wing. It landed first in the inbox of Denise Fowler, Deputy Director of Veterans Affairs. She had seen hundreds of veteran cases in her career, neglect, fraud, broken systems, but something about this one struck a different chord. The subject line was simple: "You need to see this." Attached was the image of Curtis standing beneath gray skies, eyes forward, holding that wrinkled VA letter like a final badge of service. Below it, a flood of links, social media reactions, old Navy records, first-hand testimonies from men who had served under his command. Within minutes, Denise was on the phone with the Chief of Staff. By 9:00 a.m., the story was on the President's desk. The President leaned back in his chair, the morning brief pushed aside. A former Army captain himself, he knew the weight a photo like this carried. But it wasn't just about a man wronged. It was about a nation caught sleeping. He read aloud from one of the comments on the viral thread, first black commander of the 3rd Naval Rescue Fleet. "Never left a man behind. Never took the credit. This country owes him more than a headline." Silence hung in the Oval Office. Then came the order, simple, firm, and unshakable. "Find him. Speak to him. I want every agency involved in this investigated. VA, DOJ, even local law enforcement. If one man slipped through, how many others have we missed?" Within the hour, a full review was launched. FBI cybercrime experts were called in to trace the scam. A VA oversight panel was convened, and a senior advisor was dispatched directly to Savannah with one job: deliver a message face-to-face. Back in Curtis's apartment, the knock came shortly after lunch. He opened the door to find a woman in a charcoal suit, her eyes kind but purposeful. "Mr. Dawson, my name is Denise Fowler. I'm with the Department of Veterans Affairs, and I'm here at the request of the President." Curtis blinked. "The President?" "Yes, sir. He's read your story, and he asked me to tell you something personally." "You are not forgotten." Curtis stood still, then stepped aside. They sat at the kitchen table, worn wood-chipped coffee mug between them, and talked not as bureaucrat and veteran, but as two people who both knew what service really meant. She didn't bring apologies typed on letterhead. She brought action, a full investigation, expedited benefits, direct hotline access. But more than that, she brought accountability. "You didn't ask for a spotlight, Mr. Dawson," she said gently, "but now the whole country is watching." Curtis didn't reply at first. He stared at the sunlight filtering through the blinds. "I never wanted the attention," he finally said. "I just wanted someone to listen. And for the first time in decades, someone finally did." The next morning, the street outside Curtis Dawson's apartment looked like a parade had taken a wrong turn. But this wasn't a celebration. Veterans, young and old, stood in quiet formation along the sidewalk. ROTC cadets from the local university had driven over before sunrise, forming a silent honor guard in pressed uniforms. A small group of elderly sailors wore faded caps that read, "USS Midway," their eyes locked on the apartment door like they were awaiting a final inspection. Across the street, news vans cluttered the curb, their antennas towering like flags. Cameras rolled anchors, whispered from behind their microphones, and every station was asking the same question: how did a man like this go ignored for so long? Inside, Curtis sat near the window, still in the same worn chair. He had changed shirts, pressed one of the 3 good ones he had left. His cap, cleaned and brushed, sat neatly on his head. Maya stood by the door, holding the original VA letter in one hand, the other nervously clutching her phone. Then came the moment no one expected. A black SUV pulled up slowly. It didn't carry a news crew or a reporter. It bore 4 stars on a small flag mounted near the front hood. The door opened, and out stepped a man in full military dress. Broad-shouldered, solemn-faced ribbons that stretched across his chest like the chapters of a long and brutal book. He walked with intention, every step weighted with memory. He had once served under Commander Curtis Dawson. He stepped up to the porch, saluted sharply, and waited. Curtis opened the door. The 2 men locked eyes. "Permission to speak freely, sir," the general said, voice tight with emotion. Curtis nodded. "They called you a fool, sir. They didn't know. But we did. Every man you ever led, every life you ever pulled from the fire, we remember. Curtis's jaw clenched, not from pride but restraint. Stand down, General. You're not here to salute me. You're here to fix what's broken. Yes, sir. And we're working on it. That same afternoon, the precinct that once dismissed Curtis became a national spectacle. Federal agents arrived quietly, FBI, DOJ, VA inspectors. But they didn't need long. Surveillance footage confirmed everything. The scam call had originated from a burner phone previously connected to a corruption investigation. That phone led directly to Officer Jason Myers, the same officer who mocked Curtis at the reception desk. He had stepped away from his station the exact moment Curtis entered. His bank records revealed a string of suspicious wire transfers, offshore accounts, gambling debts, crypto wallets registered under fake names. By 8:00 p.m., Myers was escorted from the precinct in handcuffs. Curtis didn't go to watch. He didn't need to. The apology from the mayor, the statements from the city council, even the front-page headline in the Washington Post calling him the man who made a nation. Remember, none of that mattered as much as the simple sight of one man, once a private under his command, now a general standing in salute. Curtis had not sought revenge. He had asked only for dignity. And now, the country gave it back. The ceremony was small by design, but no less profound. Curtis had refused anything that smelled like spectacle. No parades, he said flatly. No cameras shoved in my face. If they want to honor me, they can do it standing still with their hats off. And so on a crisp Sunday morning, beneath the aging oaks of Forsyth Park in Savannah, a quiet gathering took place. No banners, no speeches blasted through loudspeakers. Just a circle of folding chairs arranged on the grass, and a podium no taller than a lectern in a church basement. But those who stood behind that podium mattered. There were high-ranking officials from the Department of Veterans Affairs, representatives from every branch of the military, the mayor, a state senator, and most strikingly, a woman in civilian dress holding a sealed leather box lined in velvet. Maya sat beside Curtis in the front row, wearing her Sunday coat and clutching the original VA letter like a sacred text. Her daughter, shy and proud, sat on her lap. Around them stood dozens of veterans, some with walkers, some with canes, some straight-backed and sharp-eyed despite the years. No one spoke above a whisper. Then the president's envoy stepped forward. Mr. Curtis Dawson, she began on behalf of the President of the United States and a grateful nation. We present to you the Presidential Medal for Civil and Military Honor. Gasps rippled through the crowd. This was not a routine medal. It was a hybrid commendation rarely given, created in special cases where civilian integrity and military valor had intersected in a way that reawakened national conscience. The box opened with a soft click. Inside, a metal eagle winged engraved with Curtis's name shimmered in the Georgia sunlight. Curtis rose slowly. His knees ached, but he refused help. With hands weathered by decades, he accepted the medal and looked straight ahead. I don't have many words left, he said, voice low but steady. But if this moment means anything, let it mean that silence doesn't equal weakness, and age doesn't mean absence. The veterans in the crowd rose in unison. Salutes were given not just from military men, but from civilian city workers, even a small troop of Boy Scouts standing near the fountain. Across town, Officer Jason Myers sat in a federal holding cell. No camera crews followed him now, no applause, just the echo of his own choices. But here in the park there was nothing but light. Flags waved gently, trees swayed like they too understood the gravity of the moment. And somewhere beyond that quiet morning, beyond the honor and ceremony, an entire generation of forgotten heroes stood taller because one man had refused to stay small. As Curtis sat again, Maya reached for his hand. You did more than survive, she whispered. You reminded them what it means to matter. Curtis didn't reply. He simply nodded once, then looked up at the flag. This time when he saluted, he didn't feel alone. Curtis Dawson's story isn't just about a scam, it's about what we choose to see and what we too often ignore. Across America, thousands of veterans like Curtis live quietly in the shadows of the country they once protected. Their uniforms hang in closets untouched for decades. Their medals gather dust beside folded flags and faded photographs. They walk a little slower now, speak a little less. But inside them are histories, battles, losses, victories that we'll never fully understand. And yet in the noise of modern life, they're too often forgotten. Scammers prey on their trust. Bureaucracies misplace their files. Communities overlook them. It's easy to assume silence means strength, or worse, that silence means they're fine. But dignity doesn't disappear with age. It becomes heavier and more sacred. What happened to Curtis isn't rare. It's happening right now in towns and cities across the country. Elder abuse, financial fraud system, failures, these aren't just statistics. They are stories, and most of them go unheard. Not every victim gets a viral moment. Not every veteran gets a camera or a second chance. Some sit alone at kitchen tables, counting coins, wondering if anyone still sees them. We don't need another scandal to wake up. We need responsibility. We need empathy. We need to start looking again. So before you judge, listen. Before you call someone just old or out of touch, ask what they've given, what they've endured, what they've protected quietly without asking anything in return. If this story meant something to you, don't let it end here. Share it. Comment below if you've ever known someone like Curtis, a grandparent, a neighbor, a veteran, who taught you more through silence than speeches ever could. Tell us their name. Tell us what they stood for. Let's make this channel a place where we don't just remember heroes, we honor them. And if you haven't yet subscribed, like and stay with us. We tell real stories about real people. The kind history books overlook but hearts never forget. Because in remembering them, we remind the world what it means to serve and to be seen. Thank you for being part of that. We'll see you in the next story.